Awesome. Let everyone in. Hi, everyone. Good to see you jumping on. Super. So we're just going to give everybody a couple of minutes to get all settled in. While we're doing that, you might notice that there is a poll option that comes up on your Zoom, so we can start asking you some questions just to get a lie of the land at the moment, how we're all feeling about finances, heading into those first roles in practice. Maybe you're not due to graduate just yet, but putting yourself in that position of heading into that first job, how confident are you feeling? So we shall get those polls up so that we can start seeing how everyone is arriving on this Tuesday evening at 7:30. Awesome. And also, if you want to drop in the chat where you're dialing in from as well, we'd love to see the range of everybody that's on the call too. So just pop that in the chat box. That'd be perfect. And we can see. So we've got third year RVC.
Yeah, filthy animal. Is it a curling line? What film?
Let's see where you're all coming in. Perfect. Loads coming into the chat box. Glasgow, Bristol, Surrey, more Glasgow, Edinburgh, Surrey, Dublin, Nottingham, Sweden, Bristol, Edinburgh. Yep. Good to see you. Oh, everyone's flying in. Good to see so many of you here. That is perfect. And we've got that poll up at the moment, Ebony.
Yeah, we have. So far, we've asked you, how prepared do you feel to navigate your finances as a new grad? 1 being not prepared at all and 10 being super confident. And at the moment, we have quite a spread, actually, quite a spread. About 20% of you saying 1, another 20% saying 2, about 15% saying 3, 10% and 5, 4 and 5, about another 10% each. The highest at the moment is 6. Yeah, so it's pretty low. No one's gone into those higher numbers. We've got 1 person at 9, no one at 10, no one at 8. So yeah, at the moment, we're not feeling overly prepared as a team, and you are not alone if you're feeling that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the whole aim of this session here this evening, is that we can hopefully boost you up a little bit to feel a bit more prepared moving forward into those first jobs, whenever they may be. And certainly I know that I really wish that I was taught this content at vet school and didn't have to learn it myself further down the line. So I think we're about the point where we can get started. So I know everybody's still settling in, but we'll start doing some introductions. So thank you again for coming along and giving us your time this evening. This will definitely be a very valuable hour. It will be recorded, so there will be the option to watch it back, but take down some notes, pop some notes on your calendar about when you maybe need to take some action on the things that we've talked about as well, so that we're all holding each other accountable moving forward and making sure we get the best out of this. So before I run through a little bit more about how this evening is going to work and about VetU as well, I'm going to hand over to Callum from AVS to do an introduction from the AVS side, who we've been thrilled to work with on this event for a second time now.
Sorry, I was having a bit of trouble with the unmute button there, Katie. Thanks for the info there. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining the first 100 days in practice webinar this evening, run by VetU and AVS. I think the priority we've had as AVS is really supporting students, but we've had huge help from the rest of the profession to kind of support new grads and current students. And a huge shout out has to go to VetU for their continued support, because we know finances are a major struggle for students, and trying to get that best footing going forward into first practice and first jobs is key. So huge thank you and thanks for joining, and let's get started and make sure you're best set for your first 100 days in practice. Back to you, Katie.
Super. Thank you so much, Callum. And we really, really love teaming up with AVS on these events as well, because like we've just said, this was the content that we really wish somebody had come along and told us at the point where you all are right now. So we're going to be covering, like we say, our first 100 days in that new job. And first of all, begs the question, who are we as Vet U? Well, we're a team of 4 experienced vets. You'll see here, we've got Ebony Escalona, we've got Matt Dobbs, Paul Harwood, and myself, Katie Ford. We all come from different areas of the vet profession. I've worked in small animals, Matt and Paul in farm, Ebony in equine, and we've also had very diverse careers away from clinical work as well. And we've all come together. It was initially founded by Paul and Ebony and Matt, with an aim to try and help vets navigate their financial journeys and take back that control so that they can put their aim and their focus on other parts of vet life and not feeling like we're so stressed with those conversations that people so often don't have about money. So we open up those conversations. We work with trusted partners. So for example, this evening, we've got Andrew Snowball, who is one of the independent financial advisors that we work alongside, that has been a fantastic addition to these events and is so knowledgeable. You'll see that, and just passionate about helping people navigate their financial journeys as well. And you'll see more about what we do as we go through this too, but you'll find us online talking about opening conversations up about finances, which is what we're going to do this evening. So we'll run through a little bit about what we're going to cover now, and then I will be handing over to Paul. So the first thing is, on our agenda this evening, we're going to talk about the job offer. How much is it really worth? Salaries versus packages. We're going to look at how much money do we actually end up taking home. We see our salary on paper, but what does that equate to in our bank account? We're going to have a little look more at budgeting. How do we actually come up with that? What are the logistics of it, and why do we do it? And what's actually left at the end of the month? And then finally, we're going to jump to Andrew, who is very kindly going to walk us through a few of the topics that will be very useful, such as income protection and pensions, because again, these are topics we're not told about. And this is us here empowering you to know a little bit more about those and being able to take charge of your financial journey as soon to be new graduates moving forward. And finally, we're going to signpost you to some next steps with Vet U specifically, but we'll be taking your questions. So this is a safe space. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you're wondering about it or you're asking it, there is a very good chance that somebody else from your year is thinking the exact same thing. And probably a lot of us on the Vet U team will have had these same worries or concerns at some point. So please do ask it. If you've got something that you think, I'd rather ask this anonymously, I'm a little bit worried about asking this, then please do drop it either directly to any of us. So either to Callum, Izzy, myself, Ebony, Paul, Andrew. You can pop that in the chat box and directly message us. We're not going to be reading your names specifically. If you do pop that anonymously, we'll keep that between us, but please do ask. This is your place to ask these things. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to explain a little bit more through these topics that were listed this evening, and any questions throughout, pop them in the chat box. We'll come to them at the end. Callum and Izzy are keeping a good solid eye on there to make sure that we can ask the things that are important to you. So over to Paul.
I think my dad even had a sort of invite you out for dinner.
Thank you very much, Katie. Right, a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is stuff that everyone out there, your employer and all the sort of grown-ups out there sort of expect you to know, and yet I never knew, we never knew. It's just those things that you sort of learn by mistake or learn in retrospect, and you go, oh, I wish I'd known that when my first job came along, etc., etc. So hopefully, well, a lot of you are coming up to graduating this year or in 18 months time, and you're going to start running around and asking people to give you money for all the skills and knowledge and ability that you've got, which is great, and as it should be. But how do you make sure that you end up getting, one, what you're worth, and two, what you're happy with? And so we'll just sort of have a little look at what the salary packages are and how employers routinely add stuff into them, take stuff away, what you'll end up with, etc., etc. To start off with, and I've made this mistake a few times, when you're talking, check what number you're actually talking with. Some people will say salary and some people will say salary package. And if you miss the salary package bit, you'll suddenly be thinking that this is what the salary that I'm talking about, but actually they've the other side of the negotiation, the employer is adding loads of other stuff in to increase the sound of what your salary actually is. So just make sure that you're comparing salaries with salaries, or salary packages with salary packages when you're comparing different job offers, to make sure you know what you're actually getting. Now, there are loads and loads and loads of reasons why you should take a job, not just salary. So, you know, location, species, support, whether you like the people, whether you like the culture, all of that sort of stuff. I get it, and it is really important. But today, we're just going to focus in on the money, on the finance side of it. But absolutely, there is a load more to just accepting a job, especially your first job, because that makes quite a big difference to your future career, how much you enjoy it, how much you learn, etc., etc. Now, obviously, there's the basic salary when you're looking at the salary package, but most jobs out there will offer extra bits and pieces on top. Call it your salary package, which they'll hopefully entice you in with. And it's a bit like when you get like a premium bank account. It's a bit like one of those things where you pay a little bit extra and they give you loads of things, but they're only valuable if you actually value them. So you want to just check through. You might have loads and loads and loads of things in your salary package, but if half of them are of no use to you, they're of no value. Starting off with then, this one really still annoys me when I see it in job adverts. They go, oh, it's X thousands of pounds we'll pay you, and we'll give you a pension as well. But for a number of years now, tough. It's by law, you have to have, your employer has to give you a salary, give you a pension. So in my opinion, if they're giving you more than the absolute bare minimum, then they should be shouting about it in the job advert. If they are giving you the bare minimum, which unfortunately is most veterinary employers are fairly stingy when it comes to salary packages. If they are only giving you the bare minimum, which is about 3% of your salary, then really that's comparing apples and apples. Every employer has to do that. That's about, for a new graduate salary, that's about £900 a year extra they're going to be putting into your pension, which is great. You can't get it until you're much older, but at least they're starting you putting some into the pension. So don't be like, wow, they're giving me a pension. If it's the bare minimum, it's the bare minimum. CPD, again, how much is it? How much is it, and is it worth it? And unfortunately, I've noticed a lot of clawbacks now. Certainly, if you're going into some of the big graduate schemes, the big schemes that are going to support you over 1 or 2 years, often in the small print there'll be a clawback. But check out what that is. Check out if you're happy with that. It might be many thousands of pounds that they're going to ask you to pay if you leave before the time period comes up. There's nothing wrong with graduate schemes. I think they're absolutely fantastic. There's loads of support, there's loads of training, etc. But just be aware, if you are thinking about possibly, am I going to stay for the whole time? Oh, Joel, you're asking about clawback there. That's basically if you leave before the end of the perhaps 1 or 2 years, they might ask you for some of the money back that they've invested in you in terms of the CPD. So actually, to leave your job, you might have to pay £1,000, £2,000, £3,000, etc. to get out. And remember, CPD, just because someone gives you loads of CPD or no CPD, that's not stopping you adding more CPD on yourself. You can always spend money on yourself if you wish to. So sometimes it might be better just to be paid a little bit more money, and then you get to choose where you want to put your CPD allowance. VDS, professional fees, a lot will say they'll pay VDS and RCVS. It's not that much money, actually. You know, VDS is £400 or £500, depending on what you do. RCVS is just under £400. So it's not a huge amount of money they're offering there. It sounds, oh, brilliant, they're paying my RCVS fees. But if they paid you £500 more, you'd be better off. Other benefits that you might want to look at or might be in there are sort of car and van and fuel and accommodation. And we'll talk about that. And I suspect there'll be some questions for those people who are perhaps in the more ambulatory or wanting to go into ambulatory, into equine or farm, in terms of taking the car or not. And we can go into that. And bonuses as well. It's fairly rare for new graduate packages to have bonuses in there, but later on there may well be performance-related bonuses being chucked around. Have a think. Do you want it? Are you comfortable with it? Some people are not comfortable with having financial bonuses in there. Some people are. Is it achievable? I could say I'll give you £100,000 bonus, but the likelihood of you achieving it's impossible. Well, then it's pretty much nothing there for you. When you're comparing packages, make sure you stick it all together, look at it, and one employer might be offering you a significantly smaller salary, but actually it's worth a lot more for you than the other offer down the road, which is a much bigger salary, but actually the package overall is much less because they're not giving as much in terms of CPD or benefits that you might want. Make sure you know whether you're talking about salary or salary package when you're negotiating. I've made that mistake. Right, now the important bit, and from chatting with students before, I suspect there's a huge range of knowledge and ability and understanding around tax on this call. So for those of you who really understand tax already, perhaps you've already had jobs before and really have your finger on the pulse of it. Great, I understand that. I'm just going to start at a fairly basic level because certainly I was fairly naive towards tax when I came out of vet school. What you actually take home in terms of what happens to it is the taxman initially starts putting his hand in your pocket and taking money. So first off, income tax. You get 12.5 grand where that's free. The government doesn't touch it. You don't pay a penny for all the benefits of being in the country. As soon as you go over 12.5 grand, and it's just the money over 12.5 grand. It's not everything suddenly becomes taxed at 20%, but any money over from £1 to £50 to £10,000 over £12,500 is then taxed at 20%. And then if you ever get to earnings above £50,000, I suspect very rare in a new graduate package, but anything over £50,000 is then taxed at 40%. Now, interestingly, and this is something I didn't realize until later on, there's also another income tax out there called national insurance. In the old days, it was introduced as a way of contributing towards the NHS and benefits if you lose your job, etc. But actually, it just goes into general taxation. There's no difference. And so really, it probably should be called income tax as well. But no government for the last 40 or 50 years has dared say it. But anyway, there is another tax on top, which everything over 12%, everything over 9,500 is taxed at 12%. So again, another chunk of money is taken away from your bank account to pay for unemployment benefit, national health service, etc. Next, this isn't really taken away from you, it's just sort of hidden until you're much older. So the government has decided, and probably it's a good thing, to really encourage people to save for their retirement. Yes, you will get looked after by the state pension, but you're not going to be enjoying yourself on the state pension. It's not a huge amount of money. So they're trying to encourage everyone to save towards their pension. So the your employer at the moment will have to put 3% of your salary into a pot, and you will then get to have 5% of your salary taken off you and popped into a pot as well. Now, you still have that money, it's just you can't touch it until you are 65, 70 plus, whatever age it is that retirement comes when you reach that time. And then obviously student loan repayments kicking in there, probably fairly small initially when you first get earning, but as your salary rises over the next few years, again that sort of 9% starts kicking in when you're earning over about £26,000–27,000 a year. So that's all the people dipping their fingers into your lovely salary that you start off with. Next one is benefits in kind. These are really complicated, and if you start getting lots and lots, it's worth sitting down with someone and having a chat with an accountant when it starts to get really complicated. But very quickly, benefit in kind. A few years ago, the taxman realized that there was a bit of a loophole and that sneaky people could, instead of getting paid their salary, could get their employer to buy stuff for them. And instead of paying them money, they could just be paid a little bit less money, and your company that you work for could buy stuff for you. And that would then mean that the taxman was losing out on the tax on that income. And so now, if you're given a benefit, if your company buys you something and gives you something that's not for work, that you use, even if it's free, the taxman works out what it would cost and then taxes you on that. So if you're in the 20% bracket, which most of you will be in your first job or so, you will get charged 20% on that. So if your company gives you something that's worth £1,000 to you for free, even though you're going to get it for free, you've still got to pay £200 on that. And they take that, they don't ask you for a check, they just increase your tax by £200 for the year for that. That's what a benefit in kind is. Gets a bit difficult in the margins. And so if it's obviously related to work, then it's not taxable. So your mobile phone perhaps wouldn't be, RCVS wouldn't be. Stuff where you have to have it, CPD, continuous professional development, is not taxed because it's stuff that you can argue to the taxman you need to do your job. Taxable is stuff that's not needed for your job, and now this is where it starts to become a bit difficult, or perhaps there's some grey areas. You know, medical insurance, private medical insurance would be, because that's not part, you don't need it to do your job. Fuel, if you use your fuel for doing your job, absolutely that's not taxable and that's not a benefit in kind. But perhaps using your car out of being able to use your car for private use is a benefit to you, and it then starts to become quite interesting, quite difficult. And I see some interesting points already being put in there in terms of car allowance, whether it's a van, whether it's a car. That whole thing is a separate issue, which we'll come on to at the end, because it's not just benefit in kind. Lots of people have got quite complicated in terms of how much carbon dioxide it produces, the emissions, the size of the engine, etc., etc. But as a general rule, if you have a company car, you will be paying something towards that. Now, don't get me wrong, that may well be a good thing to have because it's cheaper than going out and buying a car yourself, perhaps, depending on your circumstances, but we'll cover that at the end. But basically, it's a way of stopping people having that loophole of getting your employer, your company, to buy you something that really you should have been paid a salary, paid income tax on, and then bought. And that's what a benefit in kind actually is. And the way the taxman, the government gets that is by increasing the amount of tax that you have to pay. Even if it's free, they'll still get you on the tax. Ebony, do we want to do a little poll at this stage?
Yeah, so keep your questions coming in, people. A lot of the questions that you're asking we are going to be covering, and we've also got some signposting for you to other events we have run and are going to run, and make sure as well to check out your digital delegate bag. So we're going to do a budget poll now. So hands up, who has created a budget during university? You've got the option of me, I'm doing budgets, I'm all good. Oh, I've tried it, but I don't necessarily stick to it. I've never tried it, or perhaps other. And if you've got other, we'd love to hear in the chat. We'd also love to hear reflections in budgeting in general in the chat. And for those of you that have asked about pensions, we will be coming on to that as well. And there's been an ask for, you know, having an example breakdown of our salary with all the tax. And in our delegate bag we've got for you, we've actually done a breakdown of a pay slip with all of that in to explain it, which I wish I'd had. I wish I'd had that 12 years ago. Okay, so votes are in. So we have about 50% saying I've tried it, but I haven't stuck to it. Just under 30% saying you're budget expert. Brilliant. You know what? The richness is in the room. Put your tips in that chat box. We've got about 20% saying, no, I've not tried it. And just under 5% saying other. So it would be great to hear what you've got to say on that.
Cool. Yes, budgeting, tricky. Right, we'll come on to budgeting in a second. Just to finish off my last little bit that I was talking about, this is sort of pulling it all together in terms of what you will take home in your first job. Now, I've put £30,000 in there. I've made some massive assumptions when we've calculated this. We've assumed that your first job you'll start fairly soon after graduation. You'll start in September 2021, and you'll get a salary of 30,000. That's actually a bit low. The average is about 33,000, just over 33,000. The average for a new graduate salary at the moment. But just for ease, I put in £30,000 as the starting point. There's two columns there. The reason for that actually is you will you will actually earn a bit more in the first 6 months after qualifying, and that's just a weird reason, because the taxman looks at you from April to April. That's the tax year, April the 5th till April the 4th the following year, and actually you get all the benefits for that tax year, but you're only getting paid for half of it. So that's why you end up paying quite a bit less tax in your first year, and then after that you then go on to a fairly, you then go on to a rolling 12-month rolling 12-month salary. So that's why it looks a bit better for that first 6-7 months for the first year until April 2022. So basically, if we're saying we start off with £30,000, you're going to be in the 20% tax bracket. So you earn 12.5 grand free, and then 20% tax comes in after everything above that up to 30,000. So tax is going to be at 3.5 grand. National insurance, again, that's at 12%. That's about £2,500 for national insurance. Benefit in kinds completely depends on what your company is giving you. Is it giving you a company car? Is it giving you some accommodation? What is it that's giving you? So that's why it's fairly variable there. For some of you, it'll be zero. For some of you, it might be fairly steep as a way of the taxman getting that money back for stuff that they think you should have actually been paid as a salary. Your pension, now you haven't lost this, it's just snaffled away from you for many, many, many years. Student loan, obviously in your first 6-7 months, you won't hit the threshold, so you won't have to pay anything probably for the first 6-7 months. But then it's fairly small beans after that. When you're only earning
Yes.
above the £26,000 threshold, so you're only really paying student loan repayments on that sort of £3,000 or £4,000 or £5,000 over that 26,000 threshold. So your take-home pay is about, if you're on a 30,000 salary, is about £22,500 or £1,900 a month. So that's sort of the number to have in your head, because now we're going to come on to budgeting, and obviously that's the positive, and let's have a look at the negative, what you're actually spending your money on, and hopefully what have you got left in your pocket, in your bank account at the end of it. So £1,900 is probably where you're going to be after all the official people have dipped their hands into your pay packet. Now, budgeting. It's worth doing this, and I suspect lots and lots of people on that poll, had a look at it, tried it, and fell out of love with it. It's difficult, I get it, it's hard work, but it really does highlight, and VetU has been showing up over the last couple of weeks, some little tips and tricks. It really does highlight silly things that we might be spending our money on. We might be having a couple of subscriptions. Do we really need the Disney Channel when we've got Netflix as well? I mean, these things we can have a look at when we actually focus in on our budgeting, to try and work out what we are spending our money on and where it's going. The important bit is not necessarily writing down what we've got, it's to work out what we've got at the end of it, so that then we can make a sensible decision as to what we do in terms of investing for the future. You might have questions like, how much can I put into my pension? Well, until you've done a budget, it's almost impossible to know how much you can put into your pension, because you're not sure how much you've got left over at the end of each month. So I've just done a quick guesstimation here. Perhaps let's have a look. Let's say we've got a £30,000 a year salary, so we're taking £1,900 a month home after tax, after everyone's taken their bits out. Let's assume, make some assumptions: mortgage or rent, £600, lots of taxes, council tax, utilities, phone, insurance. Obviously a bit of fun. It's probably been a bit lower, but as we come out of lockdown, we certainly might want to spend a little bit on food and drink and fun, etc., etc. And so how much have we got left? This is the important bit. The whole reason of doing the budgeting is to work out what's left. Are we going to have £100 or £200 at the end of each month after we've done everything? If we are, that's fantastic. Now we've got a number in our head that we can then go and be sensible with. We can then go and have a chat with the likes of Andrew, who will talk in a slide or two about what to do in terms of investing and securing our future. Finance is boring. We want to get this all done, all out the way, so that we can then get on with having fun and enjoying our life without constantly worrying about it. And so hopefully, if we can work out now what we've got left over, we can then move on and enjoy life, etc., etc. In terms of what to do with your first pay packet, well, that's an interesting one. We might put in the chat box, Ebony, Katie, Matt, what we spent our first pay packet on. I think I went and bought a telly with mine. So I get it. Your first pay packet, it's all great. You've got money in the bank after many years of not having much in. Don't worry too much about your first month. You know, use your first month to, I don't know, stabilize stuff, sort out your rent deposits, pay back a credit card bill that you've blown on a holiday, pay your RCVS registration fees, whatever it is. Go and buy yourself something nice. You know, I get it. Go and enjoy it. But once you get going, once you get rolling, once you get into the swing of it, having a budget and working out that you've got 100, 150, 200 pounds a month. Oh yes, Matt, shush. Once you've worked out, once you've got an idea, you can now work out what you can go and spend your stuff on. And that comes over to, I'll introduce Andrew in a second, into what we can protect. Now, you can insure against absolutely everything, and what you need to do is have a think about what's important to you. You know, what are your priorities? Very, very wealthy people can probably insure against everything and be happy to insure against everything. Most of us have to prioritize, have to say, we can't insure everything. We need to put something into our pension. We want to insure these things. I will take a bit of a risk here. And it's those sorts of things. But the important point is that those priorities might change. For me, as a single person, when I graduated, it was I wasn't that worried about a number of bits and pieces. Life insurance wasn't a huge issue. I wouldn't have been around if I had died. But now that obviously I've got kids and a mortgage, those things change. So your priorities change as you roll, and it's worth every few years having a little sit down and a little think about what actually is important again, and make sure you've got your insurances in place that are right for the risk that you're happy to take. So as life changes, sit down and have a chat. So I'd like to hand over now to Andrew. Andrew's one of the financial advisors. He's been with us for a number of years now, really does get the veterinary industry and all the weird, wacky bits and pieces. He looks after a number of us on the call as well, which you can ask questions about. So you'll be chatting with someone who, at least from the outside, understands us as vets. So Andrew, if I could hand over to you, mate.
Thank you, Paul. Can you hear me? Thumbs up?
Yep.
All good, fantastic, means the tech's good. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully the lighting isn't too bad. Sun is slowly going down and I'm trying to turn the lighting up. Oh, that's a bit too bright, I think. So really be happy to be speaking to everyone today. Just before I start, Paul mentioned some really, really good things there. So I just want to pick up on it. So really important, your first 100 days. Make sure you get some goals and some objectives down. If you document them, you're more likely to stick to them. It's not about rules and not living your life, but it's about adding a bit of structure to what you're doing so you can measure your successes as you progress, so you can stick to things and so you can hold yourself accountable. You've put in the hard graft to get to graduation, to get to that first job. So continue that into the work environment and pick up and take on some of the things from today's call. So I'm going to be talking for about 10 to 15 minutes, jargon free, focusing on income protection and pensions. So we'll start off with what is income protection. Essentially, it's a solution that provides you with a regular tax-free income if you're unable to work and do the substantial parts of your role through accident, injury, or long-term illness. Now, income protection doesn't replace all of your salary. Typically, it's between 60 and 65% of your salary that it covers. You have the option to inflation-proof the cover, and all that means is usually the cost of living goes up each year, and your cover can also increase in line with that, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. So if you've got a cover of £1,000 a month, you know, in 2 years' time, that £1,000 won't buy as much stuff. So you want the level of cover to increase as the world sort of increases in terms of the cost of living. It pays till you go back to work. It also pays or can pay a proportionate amount if you go back to work on reduced hours or reduced duties. skipping about there a little bit, mate. If you're looking to get a cover, it's always important to get it on your own occupation. Don't go for the cheapest option, because more than likely, if that's what you do, it means it's unlikely to pay out. Really, really important that you review the benefits that you have as your career progresses. As Paul mentioned before, if you've got a budget, then you know the level of income that you'll need to cover. And more importantly, you'll know the level of income that you'll be able to afford. Now, there are comprehensive levels of cover that can pay up to a particular point in the future, which typically would be when you intend to retire. So when I'm discussing with clients about protection, it makes the sense to have cover to age 65. We'd all love to retire before then, but it's prudent to have it to then, and then you can cancel it at an early stage. Now, income protection, the earlier you get it, the cheaper it is in terms of your age, because the age is going to be one of the biggest factors in terms of how much it costs in the level of premium. Your lifestyle, so whether you smoke, whether you drink, whether you've got any existing medical conditions, whether you've got any hazardous activities, all these things will impact how much the cover will cost you. Something really important to focus on is the reason why you're getting it, as opposed to the actual cost, so the value of the solution that you're getting. And by that I mean, I often talk to clients, and broadly speaking, you're paying £30,000 for a cover that could potentially cover you for the next 35 years. But people can sometimes still balk at that because they don't think that it potentially pay out, when the reality of it is that for most, in terms of the income protection industry, it's about a 96% payout. And the reasons why they don't usually pay out is the lack of disclosure during application stage. So it's really important to be open and honest about your current situation, and really important to take it up for those reasons. In terms of cover and cost, if you're in your mid-20s, you'll be looking at just under £30 per month for £1,500 per month cover, which will be inflation-proof to age 65. If you're sort of mid-30s, you'll be looking at just under £40 for a month for a similar level of cover. Now, this really depends on the individual, as I mentioned before, and their lifestyle, but that just gives you an idea of the range of premiums that you could potentially pay. Something that's really, really good and getting better in terms of the income protection that's provided is that it's not just the income protection when you need to make a claim. You now get additional support in the guise of 24 hours GP access, which is via the phone or video conferencing. You get access to physiotherapy sessions. You get access to wellbeing sessions, which includes some mental health support, and a load of other stuff in there, depending on the provider that you choose and the things that are important to you. So really, really important that when you're looking at future employers, have a look at part of the benefits package. So what do you get in the event of you not being able to work? Unfortunately, within the profession, it's not fantastic. And that's one of the things that myself and VetU are trying to help address. Happy to answer more questions regarding that a bit later, but we can move on to pensions, Paul. Okay, so pensions are fantastic. I think they're really great. I'm a bit of a geek. I think they're a little bit sexy as well in terms of what they can do and they can offer. Paul doesn't agree. I can tell him laughing there. So look, what's a pension? Essentially, it's a really tax-efficient savings vehicle to help you save for retirement. How does it work? Well, you put in some money, your employer puts in some money. The pot of money when you retire is based on how much you'll put in and the performance of the underlying investments. The investments are really the engine that drives the return that you get from your pension contributions. There's no such thing as a bad pension per se, because broadly speaking, they all behave in the same way. It's more about the investments that you're in, and more importantly, starting early. in terms of the different types of pensions, kind of alluded to earlier, you've got your national insurance contributions that you pay. Some of those goes towards your state pension. So to be entitled to your full state pension, you need to have a minimum of 35 years national insurance contributions record. That's to get a maximum pension, and to get a state pension, it's a minimum of 10 years. It's a really important vehicle, but the state pension is not going to give you the retirement that you want, because essentially it's a little over £9,000 a year, £10,000. And for most of us, that's not going to be enough. So you need an additional pension. Now, because of the regulations that have been brought in, you've got auto enrolment, but your employer's put in 3%, you're putting in 5%, which is made up of 4% from your salary and 1% from tax relief, which is essentially a government top up to your pension contribution, which is the other reason why pensions are such good savings vehicles, because not only is any of the growth sheltered from any taxation when you're saving and accumulating your pension, but for every £100 that you put in, depending on the type of policy that you've got, you get 25% immediate tax relief from the government. And if you become a higher rate taxpayer or an additional rate taxpayer, if you're lucky enough, you can also claim an additional 20% and 25%. So that quickly accumulates and provides you with a lump sum when you come to retire. Now, when you come to retire, you've got lots of options now because of regulations that came in sort of the end of 2015 called pension freedoms. And all that means in English is, rather than when you retire and you have restricted options, you can pretty much now do what you want in terms of take as little or as much out of your pension as you want, but being careful of the tax implications when you do draw your pension. So you've got 25% of your pension that you can take out, which is tax-free, and the residual amount will be taxed at your marginal rate of taxation. And all that means is if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you pay 20%. If you're a non-rate taxpayer, you don't pay any tax on your pension at all. In terms of pensions don't die. So if you leave an employer, you're being in what's called a group scheme. If you leave that employer and go to another employer, you can move your old pension and consolidate that into your new pension with your new employer. I would always suggest, recommend, encourage that you don't opt out of any auto enrolment, because essentially you're getting free money from your employer in the guise of the 3% that we're talking about. So make sure you do that. I would also encourage you to keep things simple and not necessarily open up another pension that runs alongside that, unless you've got specific needs in terms of control regarding investments and things like that. But at the early stages, it's really important to focus on contributing into your pensions as opposed to worrying about other things and being distracted. Now, as an example, if you're able to save £500 a month gross from age 24, retiring at age 60, that'll give you a lump sum pension pot in the region of £600,000 if we've got a modest growth on average of 5%. And what that means in English is, if you were to draw 3 or 4% of that as an annual income in retirement, that would be the difference between £18,000 and £24,000. Then that's starting pension savings from 24. Now, if you delayed that to age 30, but put in an extra £100, so £600 a month, that would only give you a lump sum, a pension pot of £500,000, reducing your annual pension range from between £15,000 to £20,000 a year. So even that short, that short delay in pension contributions can have a significant impact in your retirement income. So it's really, really important to start saving early and be really understanding what's going on with your pension, and make sure that that becomes habitual as well. And if you go on to become a locum or run your own business, paying for a pension through your company has additional benefits as well. So, just to sum up, pensions are a really great vehicle to help you retire, so help you fund your retirement. There's lots of tax efficiencies there, not least the tax relief that's provided by the government, but also as you go into the higher and additional rate tax bands, it can also help reduce your tax liability as well. And that's it on pensions for now.
Cool.
Super. Thank you, Andrew. That was brilliant. We've got quite a few questions that are coming through in the chat at the moment, which we'll keep to the end. But we've also just popped a link because VetU actually did a specific pensions event back in January where Andrew joined us, as well as another pension company that came along, Raindrop, that we've worked alongside too. So that link is in the chat. Please do check that one out because the whole recording's there, including like a bit of PDF cheat sheet as well, where we dive into some of these topics in a little bit more detail too. So we wanted to take this opportunity before we get to the point of doing our question and answers, of which there are plenty in the chat, as well as the ones that you've pre-submitted to, just to redirect you and just show you a little bit of what we've lined up for you from this event, because as you can see from the number of questions that have come through, this is a huge topic. And first of all, thank you for asking them, and thank you for daring to pop it in the chat, because there's so many people are asking very similar things. So as you can see on screen at the moment, we've created a digital delegate bag, which you'll find on the link here. We'll show you in a second on the next slide. There is a QR code as well that you can scan just to get there, because we're awful fancy. You'll find lots of different links on the digital delegate bag on the Padlet, where there's videos on negotiation. There's, like Ebony said, about your first paycheck. There's the budgeting cheat sheet on there. There's a huge amount of resources. So please do note that down and check that out. The second thing that we'd say to do is make sure that when you get a chance, register, maybe go and do it now at VetU, which is www.vetu.co.uk. On there, after you've registered, you have the option to book in with Andrew to chat through things like income protection or pensions questions and about any of those other protection type products that we've mentioned as well. You'll also be kept up to date with our newsletters and any other events that we've got. We're going to be doing another event with AVS in June as well, where we might be having a little bit more of a focus on negotiation, as well as covering some of these topics that perhaps your peers that are still doing finals have missed out on. So please do make sure that you register there too. Now, on the next page, we should have, from what I can remember, the QR code. Yep. So if anyone's got smartphones, if you grab your camera open and just aim it at this, it should take you straight to that Padlet. And again, like we say, just make sure you head over and register at VetU. You'll find us on social media as @VetU Community and on Facebook as VetU too, where we're always sharing top tips, trying to do some jargon busting, and we're always happy to answer questions. So if there's anything that you find on the website and think, oh goodness, I wanted to book in, I just don't know how to do it, or do you know anyone that could help me with this? Drop us an email. We're here to help. And we're here to try and help link you up with some of these partnerships that we've made as well, to try and just make finances look a little bit less scary. Now, we've had loads of questions that have been submitted when you all registered for this event, but at the same time, I can see quite a few that have come in the chat as well. So I'm going to hand over to Izzy and Callum, who are going to pose those questions to the VetU team, as well as Andrew there too. And we'll see how many we can get through for you this evening.
Awesome.
Super.
Thank you, guys. So firstly, that was so helpful, guys. I don't know about other universities, but I've definitely not been taught this kind of stuff at university, so really useful. I think you can probably see from the chat, but also before the event, we have had a lot of questions about negotiation and negotiating your salary and pay packet. I think, Paul, do you want to jump in on this one? Because I know you've done quite a bit on this.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and I think we're going to do it justice. We're going to do another talk later on in a couple of months' time, because I don't think we can really do it in 5-10 minutes here. We could end up doing the whole hour-long webinar on that. But if you're interested, I've just written a BVA blog. So if you're a BVA member, it's on the BVA website, on a blog around mindset and preparing for negotiation, and there's also also, if you go on the Padlet, if you go on the QR code and click through onto the digital delegate bag, there's a little video I did last year just talking about how to prepare, how to work out, make sure you know what you want. And really, with negotiation, especially veterinary negotiation, if you work out beforehand what you definitely want, what you definitely don't want, and then you know the little bit in between that you're happy to negotiate on, you can then go in and negotiate with a bit more confidence. What you never want to do in a negotiation is be stuck there going, I don't know. So preparation. But we'll do a lot more on that in a couple of months' time.
That's great, Paul. I think negotiation and salary is a key talking point here, and we've got another question that's come in asking about the average salary for the first 3 years post-grad.
Yeah, I scribbled that down. So one of the best places to look for this is SPIVs. SPIVs do an annual salary review, so you can actually look back over the last few years. We were having a bit of a discussion. It's either very, very cheap or free to be a SPIVs student member. So if you haven't graduated yet, you can go and be either for free or for, yeah, I'm not sure if it's like 10 quid a year or if it's for free, but anyway, ridiculously cheap. I go and become a member just for that. You get to see the survey, you get to see what's out there. It's split up by equine, farm, small, north, south, Wales, Cornwall, etc. So you can sort of get an idea of where and it. Probably the number you're looking for is the average new grad salary last year, 2020, was just over £33,000. That's the average, the median. So there's a range. Now, don't just think about salary. That is just salary, but don't just think about salary because your first job's so important. You may well, and Izzy, you'd be interested to hear what you think. If you want to go into a very well supported, very well structured internship or some sort of graduate program, you might be happy to accept less now because it sets you up more for more later, or not. So don't just think salary. There is a range, but 33. Just over 33 is the median for a new grad. In terms of what it goes up very quickly initially, because the difference between a new grad and a 1 year qualified vet in terms of experience and, to be blunt, how good they are at bringing money into the practice and how much support they need is huge. That's the biggest difference between a new grad and a 1 year. So big increase of, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000. Then it goes up probably around 5 years, you're looking at about 45 grand, 10 years, you're looking at about 50 grand, and then it plateaus. Because to be honest, the difference between a 15-year qualified vet and a 16-year qualified vet is nothing. So very, very, very quick, steep learning increase and then plateauing. And if you're going to stay as a vet without doing anything else in terms of leadership or management, it's going to be in the 50s in today's money.
And on that, should you expect a difference in pay rise if your job includes out of hours compared to non-out of hours, or if there is an out of hours option that you don't do in your practice or something?
Does anyone else want to come in? There's quite a range of how some people don't put a number on out of hours. It's just expected and it's zero. But you have to do it. Some people have it. Some people you can be flexible and negotiate. I think there's an awful lot of different variations out there. What's the difference between doing 5 days and no out of hours or 3.5 days plus out of hours? Quite complicated. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to see that.
I think the fact that there is a lot of different ways means that it's a place that can be negotiated. Okay. And lots of people will also do remuneration packages. So, every call out that you do, the jobs I've had, every call out I did, I got some kickback, which made doing it, more attractive. There's also lots of ways of changing the way you do it, whether you do it in compressed weeks and then not doing some, or, whether you just do weekends or vice versa. So the fact that there is so much variability out there means, in my opinion, that it's a really great place to negotiate. But as well, remember, I think for me as a new grad, my out of hours were the most precious, if you like, of my learning and of my development. And actually, the weird people are going to be like, Emily, you're weird. It's the thing I missed most. It's the thing I miss most about not being in full-time equine practice anymore, because I love emergency equine stuff. So yeah. It's good for learning and development, but it can also be a place to negotiate in your package.
And you know what, Ebony, I totally agree on a smallies front as well. I think one of the things to also ask about is a rough idea of what the out of hours caseload does actually look like, because I worked 1 and 2 out of hours for a number of years, but we actually had a really quiet caseload. And yes, sometimes there will be nights that you couldn't make up and they were the exception to the rule, but other times it was just our practice and we were the only ones that we covered emergencies for. Whereas there might be some clinics that do out of hours and you realize that actually they cover 10 neighboring practices. And that those nights, will you be given time off in lieu of that? Will you have a suitable recovery time? Is it that, like Ebony says, that you get some remuneration for that too? So the conversation is just to probe a little bit more into, and yeah, absolutely places for negotiation, but also just finding out what support you get during that time too, how long someone's second on call for you. And yeah, 100%. I had so many of like the life-saving moments where out of hours, in those moments where you had to learn, and they're the ones that you remember. So as much as some people will decide out of hours is not for them, if you're not sure yet, don't knock it off the list. There are so many opportunities to it.
Yeah, no, that's great, guys. And I think it answers a lot of questions that have come in the chat as well. We've also had another question coming in specifically around kind of mention of farm practice and perhaps equine as well, and what to expect vehicle-wise. And I know, Paul, you've touched on it already, but maybe breaking down the different vehicle costs and how these might be covered.
Yeah, I think me and Matt can probably talk about this. The easy, quick answer is if you're doing a decent amount of miles, there's no difference money-wise, really, between taking a company car and buying your own car yourself and running it yourself, because the taxman has set the level that they charge the tax at the level that's about the same as if you'd bought it yourself. So that's the people will always argue, and you're right, if you drive really slowly and you have an electric car and you never accelerate fast, you might be able to make a bit of cash there very slightly, but as a general rule, there's very little money in it. So if there's no real money in it, you need to decide what works for you. So if you've got, I don't know, kids or a dog or something like that, and you need a specific car, if you need a big estate or you need a big people carrier, you're probably going to have to buy it yourself, because why should the employer buy it for you? But on the other side, if you're racing at 3 o'clock in the morning down some Devon country lane and you scratch it and it's your car, how angry are you going to be if you've just bought it? You know, so I would say my quick, easy answer is do what fits your circumstances rather than worry too much about the money, because there's probably only a few £100 in it here or there. Matt, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think the only other two things to think about, and it is a complicated topic, first of all, is around commercial vehicles. So there may be slightly different tax applications if you're driving a van or certain pickup classes. So certainly bear that in mind. The second thing is the designation of a pool vehicle. And again, we probably don't have much time to go into that today, but this is a vehicle that for the tax purposes, they feel doesn't belong to any individual employee and is available for any of the employees to use. And there is no tax on a pool vehicle, but just be very, very careful, because HMRC have seen this as a potential loophole that veterinary practices try to use to try and avoid employees paying tax. So just if you're being offered a pool vehicle, just make sure that it does meet the strict guidelines. You don't want to be caught for tax at the end of the year that you didn't think you were going to have to pay. So those are two things just to look out for specifically on vehicles.
Awesome, thanks guys. And the next question, I think we're all very aware that in vet it's quite common that you go past your finish time. So what should we expect with overtime pay in that respect?
So I think it's really important when you're interviewing and you're looking for a job to actually talk to the assistants and people who work there and find out what the reality is of the job. If you love the place that you work and you like the culture and you love the team, you're likely to be willing to go above and beyond. I think we all have that innate compassion and empathy within us to do so. So I think that's something to consider. But many practices also offer time in lieu. So I really appreciated time off in lieu for extra hours that I've done in both clinical and non-clinical settings. So that means I get my time back. I don't get paid for it, but I get my time back and time off. And that is actually a higher currency for me than the cash. And some places do offer, cash as well. And some places are just going to be, look, especially within farm. I mean, not that I am farmy at all, but I'm sure Matt and Paul would say this. There's going to be really busy and seasonal periods of work where you're probably going to be working a bit later, and there's actually going to be times of the year where you're probably going to be twiddling your thumbs. And the same was in equine. So actually, I didn't mind going hell for leather in some seasons, knowing full well I'd be able to kick back and leave work at 4:35. So I think it's the ebbs and flows, but also going in and finding out the reality of that, finding out from the assistants, not just from the bosses who might be interviewing you, the practice managers, and find out what's important to you. For me, I know that time off is more important as a currency than cash, that's a value of mine. So just ask yourself, what do you need?
Yeah, and the only thing I would add there is don't forget that often entering veterinary practice is about a team approach. So think about your other team members and try and behave in the same way that you would like to be treated yourself, and in the same way that you see them behaving, because it's a team job, and we all want to feel part of that team. Nobody wants to feel abused. It's a bit like negotiation. Nobody wants to feel abused, but equally nobody wants to feel that they're trying a leg over. So just have a look around you and get that feel from the team that you're working with.
And that's why values are so important. So actually finding out what you value. I think you've probably heard now that I put my hand on my chest, time and freedom and creativity is really important to me, but so is collaboration and so is teamwork. So, a practice that works for me might not work for Matt. It doesn't make that practice good or bad. It's about, we have too many square pegs in round holes when it comes to employment, I think. So it's actually about just taking the time to figure out, is this a type of ethos? Do these people have the type of values that I can display and I can help them with? Like Matt says, it's a team approach, but it's never binary. There's gray and there's always compromise, and negotiation and our working life is all about dancing in that compromise and being happy to do so.
But go home. Don't. Work-life balance is important. You need to go and cool off. You need to let your brain cool down, especially when you're a new graduate, because it's working a lot harder than people who've just slipped into neutral and just doing it for years and years. If you stay behind late to see something interesting, if you stay behind late because it's the odd emergency, that's veterinary, of course. If you stay behind late every single day, that's not an emergency. That's how the practice is set up, and they're taking the piss. Yeah. So have a look at the culture of the organization. If every day you are staying late, something's wrong. If it happens occasionally, that's what we expect, because we're in that caring sort of profession, is what I think.
I also think sometimes you've got to be quite self-aware as a new graduate as well, that we put a lot of expectations on ourselves. Like, I must get absolutely everything done before I leave. And I know I fell into that trap. There's always something else to do. And it's valuing yourself enough to say, look, I've done what actually needs doing, and maybe I can do these other tasks in the morning, because you end up doing what I did and staying there till like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And that's where we burn out. So it's as much as having those conversations with the other people that you work with, speaking to your colleagues, looking after each other, and being part of that team. Because if you think, oh, I'll just wait until I've got everything done, it quickly becomes a habit of staying late every single night sometimes. And I know for me, a lot of that was me just thinking, oh, I'll just finish this and I'll finish this, and time rolls by. So good questions. I'm aware that we've just gone a little bit over the time. I was going to check with Paul, Matt, Ebony and Andrew how we're doing time-wise. Are you guys happy?
If we've got questions, I'm happy to keep going. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
But I do want to respect people's time, so obviously people need to jump off. We are not recording this, but yeah,
please do go if you need to go. We've had over the hour now. I was just quickly going to go back and ask a quick question for Andrew from the chat as well, that there are quite a few people asking about transfer of pensions, if they've had and been signed up for a pension in the UK and then they've gone abroad, does that go with them? Or if they're transferring jobs, people are asking about pension transfer then, and what happens with that.
Oh, on mute, mate.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So in terms of transferring between employers, that's really easy. You just speak to your old employer, your old pension administrator, inform them that you're looking to transfer, speak to your existing pension provider. For all intents and purposes, they'll talk between themselves and facilitate that transfer for you. If you're moving abroad, yes, you can also move your pension. You'll need specialist advice for that. It depends the pension scheme that's being transferred to. All you need to know, I guess, to answer this question is that it can move with you, and there's a specific process that you need to follow. And there may be some additional charges to it, but they don't die, so they're not necessarily stuck in the UK. And you can leave it in the UK if you want and transfer it at a later date.
Super. Thank you, Andrew.
No problem.
If I jump in with the next one, we've had a really interesting one in the chat, and it's asking just for advice for anyone that's already accepted jobs and didn't know to ask these questions before now, and what they can really look to do now to make sure that they're getting the best start once they start work.
If you've already accepted it, it's very hard to renegotiate once you've signed on it. But you will have reviews. You'll have a 6-month or a 12-month review, and that's your time to go ahead and do it. And actually, you can go into those situations well prepared because you've got more evidence. One, they've worked with you, the person you're talking with, for a year, so they know who you are. And probably when you are 1 year qualified, you are even more a gold dust unicorn, someone they want to hang on to. So you've got more power as well. And you can see the financials, you can see what you've actually brought in, etc. So you can go in and be more powerful. But in terms of going back now and saying I signed, but I want $5 grand more and a flash car, might be a bit harder.
There's just been a question come in on the chat that talking about changing jobs mid-tax year for with very different pay or salaries. So if you're on a very low salary, so paying low tax, and then you switch jobs halfway through the next tax year to one with a much higher salary, how does that affect tax and all those many things?
That they'll catch up. The tax man will I think Matt's already put it. Matt, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. So obviously, if you're PAYE, pay as you earn, the government will work out how much tax you should be paying for the amount you've earned in that month. And where it doesn't balance out, it will be corrected through your tax code. And the tax code is the amount of money that you're allowed to earn without paying any tax. As Paul mentioned at the start, that's £12,500, but that may get reduced if you've got catch-up tax or anything else that's contributing of which you should be paying tax on.
I think that's some really good points there. We've had a really good question come in as well, Andrew, and I think this might be for you, just regarding pensions and saving providers and trying to source ethically and environmentally sustainable providers.
Okay, very good question. So there's a lot of that going on in the wider market at the moment, and it really. So there's a difference. Let me explain this from a different way. So there's a difference between pension providers that they have ESG built in. So that's the governance, that's the responsibility, that's social and ethical responsibilities as well. And then there's the investment side of things as well. So you need to be really clear the question you're asking or the outcome that you're looking for, because you can have a company that does one thing, but the actual underlying investments are doing something completely different. So if you are doing your research independently, those are the things that you will be initially looking at. So you'll look at the investment company, house or organization, and they usually have some type of governance document that they'll share with the wider market. And then you'll also have the underlying investments, and there'll be information regarding that. What I would say is, just because a company isn't great right now doesn't mean you should exclude them from your research, because they might be putting in the steps now to be better going forward. And what you don't want to necessarily do is narrow your options. But again, depending on what you're trying to do, I would suggest you initially do some preliminary research yourself, and then speak to myself or another financial advisor to help with your research. You can also look on the Money Advice Service, which is a government-backed website. Really, really, really good source of information. And also have a look at Martin Lewis's website. Perhaps not as great for specific investments, but it's relatively impartial guidance in terms of investments and things like that. Hopefully that answers your question, but it's quite a broad topic. And I'd need to know specifically what sort of responses you need, really. But speak to me. I think that's something that we haven't mentioned, actually.
Absolutely. We touched on it a little bit when we were talking about registering at the VetU website as well, and that they can book in to speak to you, Andrew. But do you want to just talk them through what would happen if anyone that's on this call wants to talk to you and they've registered on the VetU website, they've booked a call in with you, or if you can't find that option, message us at hello@vetu.co.uk and we can get you introduced to Andrew. But what happens if people are on a call with you?
Yeah, so it's, really informal. I don't think I do formal, to be honest, but it's a really informal discussion about where you are now and where you want to get to, and if there's any shortfalls in between. And I just talk to you quite simply about the things you want to achieve, the things that you should consider. And we just bounce ideas off each other. There's no obligation to use me per se for financial advice. Most of the things that I do through VetU will be discounted or at no cost to yourself. So, and the initial consultation is at my cost. So it's worthwhile if you are considering something and you just want a little bit of a steer or a better understanding, just go through VetU channels, book a meeting. It's up to an hour, so use the time to educate yourself, and it's not painful, I promise.
Super. Thank you, Andrew. And like we've said before, and like Paul said, Andrew's spoken with a lot of vets, understands the vet profession, understands a lot of what we go through and experience as well. And it's just, as you've seen here, a really nice guy who's willing to explain things and take time with you. So definitely, even if it's not something you're at a point of doing now, because maybe you've still got finals and things to do, you can still speak now, or you can perhaps book it on your calendar and say, right, okay, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to get that booked in. But try and take some action from this, because it's so easy for us to think, oh, actually, I'll deal with that later. As Ebony put in the chat, she said, oh, I think I put off income protection for about 15 years. Try and take that action now if you can. And we've just got one more question in the chat that might be useful for Andrew to answer for us is, are there any reasons to avoid private healthcare packages, private healthcare that's included in a package? And that's a very specific question, but
in terms of employment package,
I think so. I think that's what it means.
No, that's a bonus. I can't see that there's any downside. It might be how comprehensive it is, but it will be there'll be an element of it paid for you, so it would make sense. So if I was looking for a role, some of the key things that I'd be looking for is what are the sick pay benefits? Because from my experience, they're pretty terrible for vets. Is there private health insurance in there, which is different from income protection? It's really important to sort of make that distinction now as well. So for those things, those would be really key for me, because actually, again, in my own opinion, it's significantly better than having a couple of extra grand in the pay packet if you've got those things in place, especially if you're dealing with, if you're a farm vet or dealing with large animals more broadly.
Super. Thank you, Andrew. And there's lots of thanks coming through in the chat saying that they're all going to book in and that this has been really helpful. So super. Have we got any more questions, Callum and Izzy? Anything else to add in there?
No, I think I'd just like to echo what everyone else is saying. This is really useful. And like I said earlier, we don't get taught this kind of stuff at university, just kind of thrown into the world. So this is really, really useful. And like you said, we are going to be doing hopefully another session like this in June. And obviously very pertinent for all the 5th years and new grads out there. But yeah, just a massive thank you for doing this. It's a massive help.
Oh, and thank you so much for teaming up with us for AVS, for getting on board and showcasing VetU to your community and your followers as well, because certainly there's been an awful lot of amazing questions coming in, and thank you Andrew, and to Matt and Paul and Ebony for being on here too, and obviously Callum and Izzy from AVS. So if there's one thing that you're going to do after this, make sure that you jump on and register at vetu.co.uk, because first of all, we can keep you up to date then with any future events. Like Izzy said, we're going to do another one in June. And rumour has it we might do a bit more of a negotiation spin on that one as well. And also remember, you can book in, you can speak to Andrew, you can see here that he's approachable, he knows his stuff. You can also find out a little bit more about what VetU do as well on the website. You can read, there's loads of information, there's previous recordings of our pensions event, there's a digital delegate bag where you'll find so many resources on negotiation, pay packets, budgeting, and follow us on social media too. And then you can keep up to date with what we're doing that way as well. But just think, note it down now. If there's one thing that you can take action on in the next week, jot it down, be accountable to yourself and do it. So has anyone else from the VetU team got anything else to add to what we've had here?
I've just typed it quickly in the chat box. Please, 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 please get income protection. No one else will look after you. If you can't work for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you have a nasty car accident, you break your leg, you get an illness that's a chronic illness, your employer will let you go after a few weeks or a few months. And then what? What are you going to do? Get income protection. It doesn't cost much. You hope you never, ever, ever have to care about it again. But all of us on this call, from Matt, me, Ebony, Katie, know 1 or 2 people in our year who have needed it. So please, please, please.
Yeah, and we all end up with this invincibility complex when we first graduate. You think, oh, that's something that I'll do when I'm older. But the reality is, in the practice that we work in, even if you're not going into farm and equine where we know there's big mechanical type risks, we can end up being bitten by a cat and being put out of work. And it's not just, oh, well, I feel fit and fine now. Well, we work with animals every day. So there's always a risk of unpredictability there where we don't know what's going to happen and what's going to happen over the next few days. And like Paul said, I never even knew income protection was a thing until I was about 6 years out of vet school. And I was like, wow, okay, that sounds cool. Maybe I should get some of that. So jump on it. Absolutely. If there's one thing you take from this, realize how important income protection is. I can see Matt's nodding as well. 100%.
Yeah,
Super.
definitely. So I'll be honest, I haven't used my income protection and have paid in for the last 25 years. And so some people might think that's a huge waste of money, but I can't even start to tell you the comfort that it gives you, knowing that, you know, certainly in my personal circumstance now with a family, how having that protection, you know, really gives me the comfort to sleep soundly at night. So absolutely not a waste, definitely worth all the value. And I guess because I started the policy early, the premiums are so much cheaper than if I then went and took out a policy now. I'm in my late 40s. So yeah, start early. Like in all these things, whether you're investing, saving, pensions or income protection, start as early as you can afford to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I can't get the last poll up. I was going to suggest that we repeat the poll for anyone that's still on to see how we've changed, but I don't know if you've got that on there, Paul. I've made you a co-host. It wouldn't let me do it before.
To share it?
Yeah. Will it let you restart the polling for how confident we're feeling about finances now? Might let Ebony do it. She's in the background.
Oh, yes. Yes. I think so.
Hopefully you should all have a poll up. For some reason the Zoom gods have taken away my polling privileges, so if anyone else is able to commentate on the results that are coming through, that'd be perfect. See if we've managed to up that from that average of sort of under 5.
Yeah, it's looking good. We've had some great comments coming in on the chat, and now I think we're averaging about a 7. kind of
Wow.
sitting around the 7, 8. We've got a 9 as well. So I think we've definitely boosted it and given some people some reassurance and comfort.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Lovely comments coming through. We shall let you all go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Get registered on VetU, see if you can book in with Andrew, check out the digital delegate bag, and let's go and take some action on those first 100 days in practice. And good luck and enjoy, guys. You're all entering an amazing profession. So we shall speak to you all soon and hopefully see some of you in June as well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.